So for today, we're going to cover a couple of things. This will be, if you come to our other sessions, it'll follow a super similar format. So we'll do a quick introduction on what is Operations Hub, just so that we're all starting with kind of the same framework of knowledge. We're then going to go through a workshop and talk through some customer success specific use cases that we've worked on previously, and Tyron and I were sort of chatting around for his customers to see as well. And then we'll do questions and live workshop and sort of come up with different solutions for you guys. So if you have things you're working on, things you're trying to build, questions that you have, throw them in the Q&A. What we'll do at the tail end of this is sort of talk through how you could build those solutions. So very much want to have this be interactive and answer those questions towards the tail end. And at the front end, we're going to go through some ones that we've already created to hopefully get some ideas flowing for everyone here. So with that, we're going to go ahead and jump in, and I'll give a little bit of background on Operations Hub, why we're so excited about it, and why it's something we're spending a lot of time on. So Operations Hub is the newest product. We went forward one real quick. Cool. Operations is the newest product on the HubSpot side. Helps you connect your apps, sync and clean your data, and automate all of your business process. And so one of the things that we've been the most excited about is that Operations Hub allows you to have that single source of truth inside of HubSpot and power HubSpot to do automations and actions that you can't do otherwise, leveraging sort of custom code and other functionality directly in the platform. In terms of ways that you guys could be using Operations Hub, if you're a current HubSpot customer, or whether you're somebody who is sort of HubSpot curious, as we like to say, you can sync and clean some of your customer data directly inside of HubSpot. You can use my favorite, and I know Tyron's favorite feature as well, which is the custom coded programmable automation, leveraging that custom JavaScript directly inside of HubSpot. So you can power to do tons more than you could do out of the box. Also data quality automation, leveraging different functionality to ensure that your data quality is really high. And then also advancing some of your reporting functionality as well. There's sort of two sides of Operations Hub. The majority of what we're going to be talking about are inside that professional tier. There's also a free tier, which you kind of have access to as well. So with Starter, which is the base product on the HubSpot side, that's going to be $50 a month. So with the base Starter, you're going to get two-way data sync. I think right now it supports contacts and companies, and there's I think 100 or 50 or 100 different applications you could be syncing data to and between. And with that access, you also get custom field mapping. So I believe that the free version will get you some of the standard field mappings. And with the starter version, you'll get some custom field mappings as well. And then at the professional tier, that's where you start to unlock programmable automation, bots, webhooks, some of the advanced technical use cases in and around the application as well. And you also expand how many reports and lists and workflows you can power in your portal. So most of what we're going to talk about today is going to be in and around the professional tier. But if anyone has anything that you guys are looking for specific to your use cases, throw them into the Q&A, and we would love to chat about them. So with that, we'll go through some of our use cases. Tyron, I'll probably just let you say like, hey, I want first dibs on this one for which ones you want to take. Do you want to take this one or do you want me to?
I say go for it now. I'll chime in.
All right, cool. So this is one that we run into a lot. And actually one of the reasons that we wanted to invite Tyron is that they have an app in the marketplace for cloning deals as well. Is that right, Tyron?
That is. And so one of the use cases that we come across quite often is that someone will have a deal. That deal will progress towards, getting the quote and getting the work done, so forth and so on. And then when it comes to the very end, they'll want to renew that deal at the very end. They may want to renew it and revisit that deal in another 6 months or 12 months or something to that fashion. And so what we came across was a lot of customers who said, hey, listen, I've got my deal. And for most people, they have a large list of properties on that deal to kind of handle every type of customer interaction, you name it. And when they go to make a new deal, they basically say, hey, this is going to take a lot of time to redo it. So one of the things that you'll want to kind of consider is when it comes to making a new deal, you will want to automate that. You don't want to spend a lot of time, pointing and clicking and copying and pasting and things of that nature, because it's just a time suck for whoever kind of has to do it. So once you kind of hit this stage where your deal is done, it's basically time to make another one, and we'll want to revisit that deal sometime in the future. And you want to do that in an automated fashion. That basically means it's, quicker to do, less time out of someone's schedule, and just cheaper, basically, employment ROI wise.
Cool. So we're going to run through. So if you want to check out Tyron's app, I threw it in the chat, but that was one of the reasons that we wanted to invite him here, because this is a common activity. So this one is for renewal. So if you're a SaaS business, or if you're any type of consumable. So we run into this with SaaS. We run into this with customers that are in medical technology. We have a brick manufacturer that does this, where they're selling additional bricks to all of the builders on a recurring basis. And so using Operations Hub and a coded action, you can automatically generate those deals. So the first step to get this going is going to be the same as any other workflow that you guys might use. And so what you'll do here is you'll create an enrollment criteria. This one is on closed one. So on closed one, we're going to enroll this deal. And once that deal is ready to go, then we're going to power it through this workflow. The next phase of this will be to use that coded action inside of Operations Hub. And what you'll do is you will check with the deals API. You will grab the existing ID for the deal that sort of enrolled in the front end of your workflow. You can grab also the associated line items on that deal as well. And then you can copy that and create a new deal automatically. The other advantage sort of in going through this process as well is typically we see customers who, and whether it's you want to clear discounts all of the time. So sometimes folks have that first year is discounted 20%, and then renewal is at full or list price. And maybe they allow the CSM to go through negotiations or talk through those pieces. But you can also have different logic there. So if you want to be able to have a checkbox or something that says, allow for these discounts to last for the first 3 years, or expire these discounts half the first year and then 100% the next year. You can build out all of that logic in that code, and then this renewal will automatically get generated. So whenever you win a deal, we'll automatically copy the deal that came into that workflow, create a new one, clear any discounts, and then you can assign a task out to that deal owner using standard HubSpot functionality to go ahead and follow up and manage that renewal process. So something we see all the time for SaaS businesses, consumable businesses, big pain point that Operations Hub does an awesome job of solving. So if you're working on something similar, throw it in the Q&A. We'd love to chat more about that, but just to kind of get your ideas thinking. For our next example, and this is one that we actually ended up building an app for as well, which I'll throw in, but is associating specific customer orders with newly created tickets. So this use case that we run into fairly frequently is that customers submit tickets. You're using HubSpot for your service operations, and your customers are submitting tickets on the website, and maybe you ask them for an order number or a part number or some other piece of information to help you troubleshoot and identify what is the problem that this person is having. And what we frequently see is if you're using deals for your orders, perhaps they have an order number, and that could be the deal ID or a custom field you're managing for that. Or we have customers who are using custom objects for parts or different sort of components of their business, and they have IDs or numbers for those parts as well. So the difficulty is when these tickets come in, that's just going to come in as a text property. So that means that your customer service agent needs to go and find that field, search the system, find the matching deal or the matching part, and then reference it and associate it and try to do some of these different pieces. But you can do this automatically with Operations Hub as well. So we'll go through sort of how that works. So this will be when someone comes through to your site and they fill out that request form, right? So whenever that ticket gets created, what you're going to do is you'll sort of use a custom coded action. We also have an app that helps support some of this. I'll throw a link to the chat in as well, but it uses the exact same functionality. So you could write all of this script directly in Operations Hub as well. And you can go and use the search API. So let's say you're finding deals that match for an order ID. You can search the deals API to show any deals that match, that have that order ID. And then you can use the CRM associations call to then link that deal to that ticket. So what ends up happening is now you have the ticket, the deals associated to it. And when your service agent comes and looks at that ticket, they can easily see the deal history, when they purchased that order, reference any details about that order without having to hunt through the CRM. So you're really saving them extra steps in that whole process. And you could also build additional automation. So you could send a contact owner an email that says, hey, hey, we went and looked over your deal and it turns out your order is more than 30 days old, so it's not eligible for return. Here's some other options you could take. Or one of the items that you ordered is out of stock, and so here's sort of a different path. And you can do all of that using sort of that standard HubSpot workflow logic, which is one of the things that makes Operations Hub so powerful. Cool. Tyron, I'll let you take a first stab at this one. And then for anyone that's sort of in the chat as well, I'll throw a link to that app in case you are looking for just that use case. But one of the things that we love about Operations Hub is there's different things that Tyron has built as different apps. There's different things we built as different apps. And Operations Hub lets you build those custom to your portal without going and getting a different app or trying to find something that already meets your needs. And so anything that you guys are working on or imagining, you should be able to build it on Operations Hub.
Yeah. And so the ticket priority example here is definitely one of my favorite examples. Most people have customers of varying degrees of importance, we could probably say. You've got your enterprisey, you've got your mom and pops, you've got people who are really big revenue generators. And so this particular use case is you have people who are basically making service tickets, and you want to set the priority maybe based on the amount of business that they've done with you in the past. So with custom code and actions, when a ticket comes in, you can say, hey, this ticket has come in from Walmart or whatever business it is. I then basically want to go look at my deals. This is kind of similar to the first example. I want to go look at my deals. I want to look at the amount of the amount that is closed on all those deals that belongs to this particular customer. And then based on that, I can have my own set of rules that will then set the ticket priority based on the amount of revenue they've done in the past. And this is like really helpful, especially if you have like SLAs. And most people who have SLAs have varying degrees of attention that, you know, each ticket or ticket owner may need to get. And so what this does is once your team has a fleet of tickets with different priorities, you can then shift those tickets to different types of groups of people who are going to handle those tickets. Maybe you have your higher priority team that are going to do the Walmarts. You've got your, I don't know, your regular mom and pop team that are going to do regular lower priority tickets. But it allows you to basically give more attention to the customers who are making bigger impacts to your business from a revenue perspective. We can move on to the next slide. And so if we're looking here at the build, we're basically saying, here comes the ticket is created. We're then basically going to make some API calls to the company. From there, we're going to link the company to the deals. We're going to basically sum up the amount for all those maybe close won deals. We're going to get the total value of those deals. And from there, we're going to set the ticket priority.
What I love about this use case as well is we see it all the time where it's, hey, we have an active, we're in an active sales conversation with this customer and it's for a 6-figure contract. So let's make sure that we resolve all of the problems that they have as quickly as humanly possible. And one of the values sort of in this type of a workflow is you don't need to worry about like, what's the deal associated? How do I go reference this information? You can pull all of it and then have custom routing and logic rules against it. And to Tyron's point, whether it's different teams, different time zones, whether you want to check for, you know, what types of products does this person currently have and which SLA tier do they qualify for? And you can power all of that directly inside a HubSpot as opposed to sort of trying to rig together a series of business rules and have sort of different logic that's built in there. And it simplifies it all into that one coded action, which is awesome.
Yep. Move on
cool. Those are the pre-made ones that we had. So in classic workshop form, hopefully those got some ideas turning in your heads about different ways and different solutions you could be building with Operations Hub, and would love to throw questions in the chat, things you guys are working on, different Q&A you'd like to do, and we would love to address and chat through them and workshop through your specific examples. If anyone has something that they would like to share. I know that we started going through a couple of these also. If there are some, please submit them to the Q&A because we have a couple of these. I know there was a question earlier if there's a recording of this webinar. Answer is yes, and it'll get sent out. Looks like Jan answered that one previously also.
One thing I definitely want to chime in when it comes to the custom coded actions, this is for sure. I think a lot of people are going to need developer assistant with this. HubSpot is definitely a very user intuitive platform that looks nice. You know, it's not the Craigslist of the world. It's a beautiful looking piece of software. However, when it comes to custom coded action, the expectation is that you will probably need some level of developer support. So just consider that when you're thinking about using it.
Yeah, for sure. Something I actually would love to talk about on that is, and this is something that we've talked to the HubSpot product team at length, and then we see with our customers as well, is how do these things get built, and who really supports them? And something that we typically see is there's sort of that business stakeholder, someone setting what those business objectives are, whether it's a director or a VP person or whoever it is that's sort of handling that individual problem, that says, we really need to get a better handle on our ticket SLAs, and we need to make sure that we're delivering that to people, and we need to make sure that that's something that matters to the core business. And so they'll task sort of the ops team with going and figuring out what they need to do and what they need to manage to support that. And so typically we see the ops team goes and builds those rules and says, here's sort of how we want this to work. And if people have certain deal values, or if people have different open deal amounts, or maybe they have different products, or they have different time zones, we want to handle those tickets differently. And they'll sort of figure out what those rule sets are. And then they would actually design how that workflow would interface inside of HubSpot. And they then go to a development resource and they would say, hey, how can you get this to work? And how can I power this? And then the development resource would just write that piece of JavaScript, put it into that workflow. But then the value is that your non-development team members can then go and create and build that functionality around it. So some of the standard automation they can have inside of that workflow, or they can control the enrollment triggers, as opposed to trying to build a separate application. And now you can extend the power of that pretty significantly, which is something that we see a lot for those types of flows.
In addition to a JavaScript developer or developer resources that you can easily find versus other types of technology. So generally a front-end developer, if you guys are somewhat familiar with developer resources, your front end and your back end developers are going to be they're going to be very plentiful. So you really should not have a tough time attempting to find resources to do these kind of things for you.
Yeah, there's two other questions in here, one in the main chat. Also, I'll try to go through the chat on these guys, but if you throw them in the Q&A, it makes it a lot easier for us to figure out which ones we've addressed versus which ones we still have to answer. So if you guys have those and throw them in the Q&A, that would be awesome. One question from Brandy, which is, how is Operations Hub different than Sales Hub? It seems like a lot of the workflows and other things are similar. And what's the biggest benefit of using Operations Hub if you already have Sales Hub, Marketing Hub, and Service Hub? So I can take that one. I think we're huge. We do tons of HubSpot implementations. We do build a lot of different things on the platform. And we were so excited about Operations Hub. And the main reason why is inside of HubSpot, and HubSpot's done an amazing job of building different pre-built workflow actions that are created, right? Create a task, send an email, send a message to someone. And those are really powerful. But we often run into scenarios where what we want to do just isn't possible with point and click automation. So it may be interfacing with another system. It may be pulling and referencing data that isn't linked to that record, and you just have sort of an ID that you can find it by, or it may be having multiple complex steps that you just can't achieve with sort of the standard workflow actions. And what Operations Hub lets you do is you can build anything you want. So you can now write that code directly in HubSpot. You can run that code. And it's really one of the first times that we're seeing HubSpot expand to someone who has development capabilities can customize and expand the platform directly inside of the application, as opposed to having to build software outside of HubSpot and then have it interface with HubSpot and have a really, like, you have to create an AWS node, and the lift is really high to make all of that happen. And instead, you can write that code directly in HubSpot. It runs in HubSpot. And that's really one of the most powerful pieces on the pro side. For the starter side, the sync tools are really amazing. So if you're using some of the ones that we've run into are NetSuite. There's some with SalesLoft or Outreach or other sort of sales engagement technologies, and you can turn those on and activate those without being a developer at all. And that adds a lot of value to sort of the core system as well. And I'll scroll through some of these other ones. So Tyron, maybe you want to take this one in the chat. I'll read it to you from Daniel Wilson, which is, can we automate ticket routing and alerting based off of our internal SLA? So his example was, if severity 1 case has a resolution time of less than 24 hours. And I think that's really applicable to some of the example you were talking about around how you determine that.
Yeah. So whether it's kind of based on the amount of money someone has brought in, or you have some kind of SLA, that's an excellent way to handle it. One thing you can definitely do is when a ticket comes in, you can say, okay, this ticket is connected to this particular customer. Let me go get the SLA rules for that particular customer. And then I can either set the priority, I can alert my team that, customer big bucks is definitely needs a little bit more attention right now. Yeah, and so you can alert your team. This is the great thing, and all that can kind of be encapsulated within that custom coded action. So yeah, you can definitely do that. It's definitely a good use case.
I have another one from Pete Nichols. Good to see you again, Pete. And his question was, prior to Ops Hub, we had to build Zapier's apps or similar with some limitations. And aside from Ops Hub being a better experience than a separate iPaaS, which is an integration platform as a service, what are some valuable benefits to using Ops Hub instead? So I think the biggest one is tech and complexity. So there's both the experience aspect, but let's say you wanted to, anytime a deal, this is sort of pre-Ops Hub world, anytime a deal is closed and I think that Tyron, this is something you guys have looked at into with Clone Attack as well, in terms of building a workflow that does this. And so Tyron could probably expand more than I can in terms of what you would need to architect, but I would imagine you need to be able to trigger some sort of a webhook or something from HubSpot to notify your system that this deal's been created. And then you need to have a separate, whether it's AWS or whatever your server is, to run the code that then intakes that. And then that needs to go back to HubSpot and authenticate with it in order to figure out which deal do I have, and then clone a deal and hit another endpoint. And not only do you have more engineering complexity, but you also have a greater tech infrastructure to make that happen.
Correct. In fact, if you look behind me, this is actually kind of the diagram for a Clone Attack workflow. So it's actually very, very far from simple. The whole dynamicism, the fact that it's actually very much contained within Operations Hub is really where the value is. Making a product like this is actually fairly complex, and it requires some planning, and more importantly, it's fairly capital intensive, especially up front. And when it comes to any level of product development, the majority of the cost of those products comes after launch. And so you really don't have to deal with any of that if you go with Operations Hub.
Yeah, and that's HubSpot runs the code for you. That's one of the best and simplest parts, both in cost and complexity. I want to expand. Daniel had a clarification on his question. So I thought he was looking at routing, but I think he was looking at routing and alerting. So based off of how long has it been since that ticket came in? And I think absolutely you could build that. You may be able to do that. I know time limited. There's some sort of like time and workflows and these other pieces that is challenging inside of HubSpot. But something that you could do is have a workflow with a delay, and then use Operations Hub to be able to go and fetch what was the ticket create timestamp, how does that compare to now, and then route those accordingly. Or you could use that standard HubSpot logic, and all the coded action does is say, hey, I've gone and referenced that ticket. Here's sort of the logic and the custom formula I've created to determine what should happen next. And then it just spits out that as sort of a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 or sort of routing. And then you could use standard HubSpot workflow steps after that, which I think is the biggest value here as well, and sort of expands on Pete's question, which is the value of Operations Hub is it sits directly inside of your workflows tool. So all of the other functionalities that you would do with HubSpot inside of a workflow, you can do with Operations Hub as well. And you're just expanding what it's capable of by using those coded actions.
Yeah, one use case to kind of consider is automatically closing tickets. So you can definitely kind of piggybacking off what Connor was saying, you can have some level of workflow that basically says take a pause and then revisit this particular workflow node every 24 hours, whatever it is. And then you want to basically cycle through your tickets. And for those tickets, you want to see if the last correspondence to those tickets has been within 7, 21, 30 days. And if there's been no activity, then you just close the ticket, right? You close the ticket. That's one less thing for your team to have to worry about. Any other tickets you can basically send out to your team and say, hey man, looks like there's been no activity, reach out to these customers, go ahead and, let's basically try to wrap up some of these tickets so that they're not just kind of sitting around with no activity. Or reach out to those customers and see if has the problem been resolved. Maybe they misfired, maybe they need a little bit more attention, but you can do all those things there.
Question from someone anonymous that I want to touch on that's not necessarily Operations Hub specific, but they did ask, which is there a way to set stage update properties as dependent? So the example was when a deal stage is closed lost, I'd like to have primary reasons, and then based on the selection, secondary descriptions, and some of these other pieces. Inside of the HubSpot UI, you can't do that today. You can have required fields at stage change, but field dependencies are not currently supported. What we typically see for those situations, and you could do, is you could manage those, and then we sometimes see customers use sort of like a final form for the deal owner. So basically they move it into those stages. We see this with like deal desk teams as an example, which is they move sort of that deal into a stage, which is, ready to submit. And then you could power a workflow and then send them to a form. And then in that form, you'd have a little bit more control over dependencies and logic on that as well. And that's not so much on the Operations Hub side, but Operations Hub does not help with sort of field controls. It's more on sort of the automations and some of those different coded actions there as well. I also saw a question from Daniel Wilson. Daniel, I threw a comment in the chat here, which is, can we discuss your events API and building workflow automations? And I'm not sure what that means. If you can expand a little bit on it, would love to take that as a question from you as well. And then for anyone else who has anything, would love to chat through those also. I think we've answered a handful through the Q&A. So if you guys have some, would love to add more to that list. While we're waiting, Tyron, maybe I'll kick it to you in terms of where you see advantages from more of that technical perspective, as somebody who manages a lot of that infrastructure and maintains a lot of those pieces and has built some of those apps outside of HubSpot, and where, to your point, some of the functionality to power clone attack workflow, and how that would be different if you had sort of access to Operations Hub as an individual org.
Yeah, so one thing to kind of keep in mind when it comes to application development is that scalability is usually like a major component, right? Just because something works for you doesn't necessarily mean it works for everyone else. And just because it works with one deal does not mean it's going to work when you have 100, 200, 300, 400 deals. Like as you begin to kind of get further out into the future and business has been booming for you, fingers crossed, knock on wood, right? Application performance becomes really important. And so one of the questions you always kind of have to deal with is this thing going to work? If I turn my back, is this thing going to work when all of the customers I've wished and prayed for finally come in the door? And the answer is probably, but you're probably also going to need some help. And so application development, as I always tell people, software development, application development, it is much harder and much more expensive than you think. And even as a person who runs an application development, I generally tell people to leverage, if you can, go buy over build if you can. And unless you have some kind of serious thoughts around OpEx and CapEx and things of that nature, definitely buy over build. If you go with a HubSpot product, the one thing about it is that they're going to kind of abstract away any of those scalability further down the line type issues that I just kind of brought up. And so I'm a big advocate for basically just kind of buying things out of the box and to grow into your needs, especially when it comes to anything that has some level of complexity. If you look at the diagram behind me, this is actually our schematic for building clone attack. So I spoke about clone attack earlier. It basically copies deals, companies, contacts, things of that nature. And it works by someone saying, hey, I have a deal, I have a contact, and I click this button, it opens up a little panel, and then I'm going to copy this, boom, 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 done. And our next version of that is basically to use workflows. Allow people to use workflows with it. And so with workflows comes a very high level of load because people are doing things in an automated fashion. No one is checking all these things. And so the system has to be set up and architected in a way that is highly scalable. And it's kind of like, unless you want to deal with a fleet of knowing cloud technology and Amazon and things of those natures, which is cool. I love it. I tell people, you should be a developer. I tell everyone to come into the IT world, come to the dark side. But that then is really distracting from doing other things like running the business, doing marketing, getting customers and things of that nature. So HubSpot really extracts all of that away with Operations Hub, which is why I'm a really big advocate of it. You still have the flexibility of custom coded things and all the future possibilities that you can do with custom code without any of the infrastructure or associated costs that come with that.
I have a question from Daniel Wilson that I'll answer to some degree now, but I also have some good news, which is we're talking a lot more about your specific use case in a week or two on another webinar. So Daniel's question was, we built a CRM for mortgage professionals and adoption self-service are currently their largest pain points. And he wants to leverage the events API to inform purchase personas of their users' login activity, login duration, time on feature, and overall use deltas by week or month. And he's trying to figure out sort of how to do that. So I think so we have a webinar in, I think, 2 weeks or so that we can share over to you guys that we'll sort of distribute with this, that's around product-led growth, which I think is going to be really applicable to this. I would recommend taking a look at the behavioral events. So the custom behavioral events with HubSpot, it's a Marketing Hub Enterprise feature that would allow you to send in data from your, I'm assuming here it's an external sort of CRM application, and you could send that data into HubSpot, and then it shows up as timeline activities, and you can build that into lists, you can build that into workflows, and you can structure and manage all of that data directly in HubSpot. And our webinar in a couple of weeks around product-led growth is with High Touch, and it's a lot about how to do that. If you're using a data warehouse, you have Snowflake, you have other ways to grab some of those pieces. And that's something that we'll touch on quite a bit. And Daniel, we throw up my email, and then we'll put Tyron's in the chat. I think we just neglected to update this last slide here. But for my email, if you want to email me directly, I'd be happy to chat with that specific use case. But I think that there's a lot of ways to do that. And I think it's probably a little more complicated than just using Operations Hub, but I think what you're describing is something that we see a lot, and it's probably something we can help you out with. Other question from Brandy in the chat, which is, does Operations Hub give more options for field calculations than what is available in CRM and Sales Hub? And then some questions around reporting, and is that more extensive and flexible, and how can it help with some of these other pieces? So the answer is yes. So basically with Operations Hub, you get access to sort of some more field types and validations. Jan, if you want to throw we'll grab a link for you for some of the things we'll throw in the chat in terms of the additional workflow actions that you get for calculations, and you can use sort of time between and some other functions in there. And that's in that starter level. For anything you can't do in the starter level as well, that's really the big value driver of Operations Hub also, which is if you have field calculations or custom formulas that you're trying to build, even formulas that go across multiple objects or pull data together, you can do them in Operations Hub by coding that formula directly. So you could basically have a workflow that says when contact property, last ticket submit date is known, go and power an Operations Hub workflow and have that workflow say, how long ago was the last ticket that they submitted? What was that SLA? How long did it take us to complete it? And you could fetch all of these date or time fields, and you could build whatever formula you want into that code. And then it would update a field property on the contact record. So if there's any calculation that you're trying to do, as long as that calculation is theoretically possible, you should be able to build it in a coded action, and then it would just stamp onto a field, which is something we actually see a lot. And that's very similar to some of our SLA example, which is just instead of it sort of making a decision off of a table, it's calculating that kind of a value.
I just want to
go for it, Tyron, please.
Around the SLA. One thing that we did is we basically had a customer who said, hey, listen, I've got service tickets, and I would love to know exactly how much time my team is actually spending on these tickets. And there's sometimes a ticket is open on a Friday, and then someone works on it, and then it's the weekend. They go home and they come back and they work on it on Monday, and maybe a little bit on Tuesday. And so one of the questions that they had was just like, I'm not getting a real accurate number in terms of the amount of time spent on a ticket. And so one of the formulas that we did was we looked at a ticket, we looked at the stages it was in. You can kind of look at the field history. So you can see in HubSpot, if you use the API, you can actually see how long or when a ticket changed its status, or when it changed its what pipeline or status or stage it was in. And we looked at that, and then we looked at the total amount of time that it was in a given stage. And then we basically subtracted business hours, holiday hours, weekend hours, and then we finally boiled it down to like the most accurate to the second value you could get. And then that actually let the customer know how much time they were actually spending on a ticket, excluding all of the downtime from business hours, holidays, and things of that nature. So you can do all those things with custom coded actions with Operations Hub.
To expand on something for Brandy also, that she had a question on, how does Operations Hub help with cleaning data? I'm going to put a link in the chat here also, which is cleaning your data with workflows. So this is available in the starter, it's Operations Hub Professional. So you can format data inside of your workflow. So there's a ton of different actions. So you can add a number, so you can increment something, you can add amount of time, you can change characters to lowercase to uppercase, change a date format, capitalize something automatically. And all of these are sort of out of the box workflow steps. And so Operations Hub helps you because instead of sort of, hey, every quarter we need to export all the data and clean it all up to make sure it matches our formats, or we see that a lot for data import processes where before you go and import data into a system. And I think one of the most common use cases we run into there is with content syndication or some sort of process that you're doing that involves data from a whole bunch of different sources, is if you previously you had to aggregate all of that, run rules on it. Maybe you have a master spreadsheet or a macro that's built that cleans everything up. And instead you can just import that direct into HubSpot, have a workflow that does data cleansing, and then it can update and retag all of those pieces. So there's a whole bunch of actions, and the link I put in there details what those are, but cool ones are like remove HTML tags, round a number, reformat some of your dates if you're moving from, if you're moving from European formatted dates to US formatted dates or vice versa. Really, really valuable way to automatically cleanse and optimize some of that data for your use case. Cool. I will give it another minute or 30 seconds if anyone else has anything that they want to cover and we can tackle it. I know we threw the wrong email into the chat here. Tyron, if you want to throw your email into the main chat. If you want to connect about any of these use cases, feel free to email me directly. Hit me up on LinkedIn. We do a ton of these webinars and content. We have some more upcoming in the next couple of weeks around product-led growth and integrating your product or your application data into HubSpot and how to do that. I think we have some more Operations Hub workshops as well. And then Tyron, I know Appchemist folks have a whole bunch of apps and build custom applications as well. So if you guys are looking for help on that stuff, hit them up.
Hit me up.
Cool. Well, thank you everybody so much for attending. We'll send out the recording as a follow-up and sort of more information on Tyron and myself. And we appreciate it. And we look forward to seeing you guys on future webinars. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Appreciate you.